I want to welcome you. My name is Indra Mangal, and I work in the education department at the Asian Art Museum. And on behalf of the museum, I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's virtual program, and thank you for your continuing support. Our virtual programs explore a range of topics and experiences, and we hope you'll join us for our other upcoming programs, which you can find on our website. And we'll get this Zoom thing down sooner or later. Our museum staff is very concerned about the wave of anti-Asian violence across the country and around the world during this pandemic. So you will see that some of our programs will address this issue directly, and the museum is exploring ways to further show solidarity and calls to action for both our Asian American and other communities of color who are affected. We welcome your feedback about tonight's program and suggestions for future ones. And after this program, I'll be sending an email survey to those of you who signed up via Zoom. So about our guests tonight, we are so thrilled to have them. I can't tell you, we feel very honored. Led by composer-pianist JooWan Kim, the hip-hop orchestra Ensemble Mik Nawooj creates what they call meta music, you'll hear more about that, by sampling principles of hip-hop and classical. And this is executed with also their MC lyricist Sandman, and you will see his name is Edward on Zoom, but that's our MC lyricist Sandman. And also on the program is Christopher Nichols, who joined JooWan a decade ago and is their director. Ensemble Mik Nawooj has attracted some of the most excellent classical musicians and MCs in the Bay Area while gaining national attention from outlets, really prestigious outlets, such as the Huffington Post, ESPN, Wall Street Journal, NPR, Pitchfork, Upworthy, Now This, and more. We have been working with the ensemble to premiere new work at the museum in July, and this work was commissioned by the Yerba Buena Garden Festival. And if we are not able to be on site in July with an audience, the group will videotape the performance in our beautiful Samsung Hall and show it online later in the summer. So we will welcome your questions tonight. You can put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and I will try to get to as many questions as we are able. And without further ado, we want to welcome Ensemble Mik Nawooj.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, thank you so much, Indra.
Hi. So, hi, my name is JooWan Kim. I'm the composer and artistic director of Ensemble Mik Nawooj.
Ed?
Oh, I'm Edward James, Sandman, the MC, lyricist of Ensemble Mik Nawooj.
Hi, my name is Christopher Nicholas, and I'm the executive director of Ensemble Mik Nawooj. We're a hip-hop orchestra comprised of flute, clarinet, violoncello, piano, upright bass, drums, our hip-hop MC, Sandman, lyric soprano, and turf dancer. And so just to give you a little bit of what's going to be going on tonight. So we're going to be talking about what we do, hip-hop and classical, and how that mixes together. And we're really going to be discussing what EMN is, and as I mentioned, what we're doing and why we're different. And now, before we get into that, I'd like to show you a video of just to kind of get the ball rolling, to give you some context of what we sound like and what we look like. And without further ado, John, if you can play California Soul, please.
It's the sound you hear, be loud and clear, it lingers in your ear. You know you got nothing to looking for my Cali swag. I'm California game by the Bay of Cali brag. Go Gate Guardian, Pacific Coast Harboring, world renowned partying. Weather so good, yo. Never depart from it. Come be a part of it. No Cal to SoCal, we all the sins. I beg your pardon if I seem to try vibes, but this California soul got me so ignited.
Out of the east, she's alone with the poem with only Mojave, the me, walk the money, the money she's shown me. If only I can say more for those here before me, original OGs, homies, so you know me now. We all up for the goals and all the goals we got.
West Side.
California soul.
The west side, ladies shaking like Cali quick citizens. The golden state and ain't no debate. You got the West Coast capital, that's just factual. Picture sunset, sink in the latitude. Let me show you how this Cali lifestyle do. I'ma show you how this Cali lifestyle do.
OAKSFBJOLA, wait, need I say ho? OOK, San Ho, SAC, Bishop, B, got C, taking the way, making the bay, out of the box, taking the day, giving the K, making the name, is the aim, baby. Give me the love in the street, welcome to company, me. Body company, your beat, cause it's gonna be something to see.
Set
from sundown to sunset, you gon' look wrong, yeah, to get into you, and through, and do what it do to you.
California soul,
from sundown to sunset,
Cali lay back,
Cali cool, into you,
Cali on the man,
and through,
Cali swag,
and make you move.
It's like that,
and do what it do.
It's like that,
what it do to.
Come on. What is it? Come on. Let's go, Annie.
Yeah. It's your favorite mistake to play, taking all day.
What?
So pick up your baby, you get on your way. Whatever you take, you can get you a plate. We always gon' game change, you know we can name say. They take some time, you know I ain't lying. When they say it won't allow, with some Cali state of mind.
We got the home of the warriors, the A's, the warrior shark, the shines. So come on now, we be the base finest. A point of closer, we get it open. You know, we keep it floating, time the stars seem closer. From Golden Gate Park to Calvert Boulevard, go to Old Rep Dog, but what you think about it? West Coast, a brave, beautiful ball. EME is signing off. California soul.
California soul.
All right, and we're back. Thank you so much, John. So that was California Soul. That was a work that was commissioned by ESPN for the NFL Super Bowl 50 a number of years back. And it was originally done by Marlena Shaw. And as you could see from the video, that we're a pretty large group. And given from what you heard and what you saw, you can see clearly that this is a combination of two very different styles of music, and we're going to kind of delve into that tonight. So without further ado, so my first question, also I just want to clarify, so there's going to be a little lag with some of the videos because we're streaming and everybody's streaming now. So just kind of bear with us, and I'll be moderating and asking JooWan and Sandman some questions, and we'll take some questions and answers toward the end. Okay, first question, JooWan. So both of you, can you guys tell me or tell us what the difference between hip hop and classical is, and tell me what EMN is doing.
Okay, Ed, Sandman, would you like to answer that first, and then I will kind of.
Okay, the difference between hip hop and classical. Well, my perception is always that hip hop has come out of deprivation, while classical music has come out of provision. Right? Classical music, as I understand it, from its inception, grew because there was nobility, people with money commissioning music, and hip hop came out of this deprivation, lack of instruments in schools, lack of places to celebrate, play, and places that were otherwise just kind of lifeless because they were kind of just these concrete landscapes. And so those have been primarily the different things. And so like now, even now to this day, somebody can go to school to learn an instrument or classical composition or conducting, but there still is no established school or conservatory for, hip hop art as a whole, but especially for emceeing or rap. And so those are the big differences I noticed between the two genres as they exist today.
Yeah, okay, so just a quick question. Would you want hip hop rhyming to be taught in conservatory? Would you want it to be that canonized and institutionalized?
Well, not with the aesthetic of hip hop, because I think the aesthetic of hip hop as it exists today is a distortion that has been helped along by industry and not necessarily the art forms or the techniques or methodology itself. So I would definitely want rhyming as much, or emceeing as much as people know about it, or graffiti art as much as people know about it from a technical standpoint, to be canonized, but not like this is the right or wrong way to do it, but these are the techniques as practitioners understand.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that one thing that I've noticed that is different from hip hop and classical, I think for me, the kind of methodology of how you approach writing is very different. Because if you think about classical music, the way it has been sort of taught and the way how it has been like sort of the de facto universal art music of the world, it is taught as if it is the classical music of the world. But then when I was actually growing up, classical music was just new music. I was interested in the fact that it was, it had some sort of principles. There are things like counterpoint where you can like have 1, 2 independent lines and you can play with them and you can make it independent and harmonious at the same time. That was very intriguing for me. And a lot of it for me was just figuring out those techniques. But I was really not interested in any of the cultural aspect. So I didn't have that to begin with. And what I found that in hip hop that was very different from classical music was that there is a sense of spontaneity like jazz, but at the same time, there's also a beat maker's making a structured sort of musical sort of cohesive one form that tailors with the rhyming. So for instance, we have people like Dr. Dre that makes it as epic as possible, as orchestral as possible, or there's somebody like Jay Dilla that really plays with the structures of the form, where he has like a bunch of odd phrasings, like two bars. You would insert sometimes 2/4, and that doesn't happen in other productions. So I felt the difference for me was that there's this spontaneity that is kind of kind of balanced with the end of the rhyme. So unlike jazz, where you can go forever in terms of like how many times you can improvise. I mean, I guess you could do that. I guess Sandman, you could like freestyle for 8 hours and I can just keep repeating the loop. But
yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, there is a poetry that is finite, and then within that there are musical interactions to it, so that it is sort of like half and half in terms of, how much it is improvised, how much is spontaneous, and how much it is structured.
So kind of going along that idea, so with these ideas of what hip hop is, what classical is, what is it that EMN is doing, and how is that different?
Well, I think that to give you an idea is, I really started doing this stuff not to like make this fusion of hip hop and classical at all. I actually got fed up with the so-called concert music aesthetic, and then I felt like, okay, I wanted to get out of here. And there was a great occasion, and each semester, the San Francisco Conservatory of Music Composition Department suggests presents a student composer concert, which is quite significant. And I thought that, how can I piss off all these teachers? And in doing so, I said, okay, maybe if I have MCs in it, then they'll really shake them up, which it totally has. And one thing that was really interesting that was not intended was that when we did it, we had a lot of people liking the result. And at the time, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even like hip hop. I just had no reference. I just wanted to do it as like a novelty piece. It's a gag. I wanted to, flip off like middle fingers to classical music, and which in that way, I guess I'm somewhat hip hop and punk rock in that way. But then really after that, and when we got a huge write-up on the Oakland Tribune for that concert, and then the result from the audience, that really made me want to sort of investigate what hip hop was. And my MC at the time suggested that we make an album. So I proceeded to write about an hour of music, spending about 6 months. And I had to think about what I did, because even then and now I think of it as, I don't know, serious composer. I think of myself as a composer that is trying to do something meaningful. And I had to really seriously look at hip hop, and I got into it, and eventually I met NWA, not Jay De La Fuss, NWA, and then it was After Police. That was a track that I felt that I got what was going on. The urgency of the piece, the kind of audacity of this people that were saying it. This is like way before this police brutality stuff. And I heard it like afterwards, right? So, and then they were saying this like openly, all this bravado and like supercharged feeling. I got it. It was necessity. So my koan of like, okay, is it actually clever structures that we need to invent to make this musical language forward? Obviously not. You see this kind of, even people like Nirvana, they don't know what music theory is, or these people don't read music. It doesn't matter though. What mattered at that moment, I realized, was the necessity. So I usually say I was dipped into the river of hip hop and then reborn as hip hop composer.
Before we go to the next video, I have a quick question. So just for the audience clarification, I know most people probably know this answer, but I think it's important to clarify. Can you tell us what concert music aesthetic is?
Okay, well, that's a very good question. And I actually don't know what that is, because there is a lot of different, it's hard to answer it, because there is no such thing as the right concert music aesthetic. But obviously in 19th century and even early 20th century, they thought that this was the universality, right? Mm-hmm. This is the only way to be, the right way. And this is sort of like science, which is not true. So what I see now, what the composers are doing, is that there is an underlying sort of subtext that people are creating this novel language of music, and you're like researching this kind of stuff or inventing this new language and somehow pushing the art forward. Mm-hmm. And as a result, what you have is almost total alienation between that product, that noble endeavor, that philosophical, pseudoscientific, amazing endeavor, versus the real world where people are listening to Kanye West and Kendrick Lamar and drinking 40s.
All right, well, going with that idea, I'd like to,
okay,
oh, yes.
What? No, I was going to say, because I wanted to answer the question about like what EMN is doing.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, if I could give a little background around how I identify with hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
I differ from a lot of other people who observe hip hop in that I view hip hop as being very broad, right? Because it came out of something very organic, and that's how you have all these different art forms as far as breakdancing and graffiti art and emceeing and then producing. That's how you have all these art forms that were working together in this one space, because nobody was telling anybody this is how you do hip hop. People were just doing it. So EMN and what EMN is doing always seemed like a natural evolution for hip hop, right? Hip hop has been staged in front of live instrumentation for a long time, not a period ensemble or classical instrumentation, or perhaps a composer that is producing original music, writing original music for MCs. But why not, right? Hip hop has always gone places where, quote unquote, it wasn't supposed to go. Like last year, 2019, you had a country hip hop hit, right, with Old Town Road, right? So this has always been a natural evolution. I think with us, it became a little bit more organic in the fact that none of us set out to like we're gonna do hip hop and classical, and that's gonna be how we're gonna be novel and great. We didn't set out to do that. It was just like, you know what, we're doing this, and then as we noticed the implications and how powerful what we were doing was, we just continued on with it. So all that to say that there's a way for me that is grounded as being hip hop, although for the public it's something totally different. And so, yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna come back to this type of question. John, if you can play our next video, please.
I remember dreams of nothing but sativa, creeping along the beach with a girl from Ipanema in a beamer, holding up the middle finger, thinking green up on my pockets and the envious couldn't be any greener. Keep up, speed up, I feel the heat, I got fever, haters out and out for me for trying to stack my cheese. I'm from handing out hematomas and cranium. Can't you tell that I'm bad as hell, I got contraband that I'ma have to sell. Mama said I'm on the path to jail, but I'm getting gas from what I had to bail. How did I manage to get so I resemble a beast, so fluttering something? I be sick, mother, put up this level, just had a mother. That was the devil, I know it's nothing. I do all of the struggle before. Say that's the blood, and nothing I'm loving. I'm in the run, I'm in the run, under the summer, they come, they want to see me come undone. Still on the rest of my life, I'm going to take on my bed, still on the floor, still in the hole, and never earth, drink fluid, water douse fire. The cycle renews. The cycle renews. Yeah, who shall sweet you? Then he heard, yeah, who shall sweet you? Then he heard, yeah, who shall sweet you? Then he heard, yeah, who shall sweet you? Then he heard.
All right, and we're back.
Jesus.
And that was a collaboration EMN did with American River College Orchestra in Sacramento. And we called that our hip hop orchestra experience. And so that was just a one-night performance, right?
Yeah, it was one night.
Yeah.
But we're hopefully, if this thing kind of clears up, we're supposed to perform with Symphony Napa Valley, smaller version of it, but it's the idea is we're collaborating with the local symphony orchestra, either in like chamber orchestra setting or full symphony orchestra.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. And the conductor there was Stephen Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so my next question, now this is something that we get asked quite a bit, so I'm just going to ask it flat out. So, so Since the audience has now seen, a couple of our videos, have kind of seen what we do, the question is always that we compared a little bit to Hamilton. So, looking at other hip hop inspired productions like the musical Hamilton, how does EMN use elements of hip hop to make music? And so yeah, we'll ask that question first, and I'll ask a second.
All right. So three things. I want to preface this conversation with three things. I don't understand three things in America: football, racism, musicals. So musicals, I've never gotten. What is going on? Why do Americans love this? But having said that, Hamilton is an interesting case because I think it's an innovative sort of endeavor in a sense that they are, they're not really going with the historical facts, and the main cast or casts are mostly POC or all of them. And music has some elements of hip hop in it, but largely the act or work is musical. You know why I know that? Because I don't like musical, so when I heard it, I didn't like Hamilton. There you go. It's nothing against Hamilton, but
I for one like Hamilton.
Yeah, so that's where I stand with Hamilton. I do think that it's a very important work. I think that it's a seminal work in the sense that, and ironically, we've been followed by, or not followed, we've been pursued by and persuaded by a producer in Broadway that commissioned us before, who liked our music for some separate project. So I have actually written a musical.
Ironically enough.
Totally hypocritical.
I don't like musicals, but I'll write them.
Because I think that my love for making music is triumph. And I don't see genres anymore, and my eyes are all like,
gotta pay that rent.
I didn't want to look. Yeah. So, yes, and as for how we are doing it is what we call it is through this principle called method sampling. Method sampling is this idea that you are sampling or borrowing rationales that are not foreign to you, and then by reframing them to render something new. So to bring that into the normal conversation is that when I first started doing this, my idea was to use only classical techniques and only classical instruments, aside from the drums and emcees, to mimic or try to recreate Kanye West or something that I heard on the radio. So what happens if you don't have any context of how they're generating their work? Obviously, you fail to create exact replica, but in doing so, I've came up with something else. So the past 10 years, or actually for me personally, 15 years has been this sort of trial and error endeavor of rendering this new kind of concert music. So largely what we are actually sort of changing or updating in terms of aesthetic, in my mind, is concert music. Because let's face it, hip hop really doesn't need any help. Hip hop is doing fine. We have Kanye West, who's losing it, but great artist nonetheless. We have Kendrick. We have a lot of artists that are actually making a living, and not only that, influencing the psyches of the people. And I think that concert music and then performing arts at large has sort of developed this kind of insulated, inward-looking picture, and that has alienated audiences. So, I mean, this is obvious if you look at instances like, for instance, San Francisco Symphony would sell out if you have Home Alone in the background and there's like orchestras are playing, but then the next day you have a subscription concert of Mahler or Bruckner, people don't come, So the demographic is literally dying out, and B, the aesthetic that has sustained itself, the allure of universality of this classical music being the classical music of the world is disintegrating. And not only that, they have no idea of how to move forward to actually approach the audience, and namely all these modern composers that are writing this crazy stuff. So.
Sandman, so what do you think in terms of how the difference between Hamilton, EMN, and how EMN is using elements of hip hop to make music?
Well, I think with Hamilton, now I haven't seen Hamilton, but what I have done is I've actually read through the play. You know, there was actually a book in the library that I sat down and read through. And so when you even read through the writing, it's not purely seeing. There's dialogue, and then there's chorus, and then there's, you know, and then there's rhyming. And so I think it utilizes techniques of rapping from hip hop, but it's not as if it's like the MC is at the forefront of the production. That's not it at all. It just kind of includes these elements and techniques, and therefore people were like, well, now it has hip hop in it. And so it's like, well, okay, that's cool. But like JooWan said, at the heart of it, what it is really a musical, and it actually comes off entirely different because it's far more structured, and the story arc is very clear, and you're supposed to see costumes, and it's a production, and you know fog comes from this way, so forth and so on. And with us, it's a little bit more like, you know what I'm saying, like we made this music and it's dear to us, and we bring it to you with this sort of fervor, and so that's how it differs to me.
Okay, and Sandman, so I want to ask you this question. So how long have you been with us?
About 8 years, right? 8 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in those 8 years working with us, what has been your experience with like EMN's audience?
Oh, well, so for me, so I've been, you know, prior to the 8 years of performing with Ensemble Mik Nawooj, I was already performing on stage. I was performing with a group called The Attic, which was, you know, pretty much it was a hip hop group, 3 MCs, you know, a DJ. And then on my own, but still, like, you know, backed by a DJ. I've always wanted to perform in front of live instrumentation. Just having done it prior to EMN, is the way it feels on stage it just feels more powerful. And so performing with EMN and then being in front of audiences, oftentimes when we performed, we were in front of audiences that I thought I didn't belong in front of. And because I hadn't been in front of these types of audience before, and I'm not even necessarily talking about race. What I'm really talking about is age. So I've been in front of so I tell this story all the time, but like we're performing at the Church of Christ Light in Oakland, California, right next to the lake. And most of the crowd that's in front of us have to be over 60 years old, you know, or at least that's my perception. And directly in front of me is an older white gentleman, has to be 70, 80s. He has his walker folded up next to his seat. And I'm kind of mortified because, and as far as I'm concerned, we shouldn't be doing this in front of him. He's not gonna receive it well, guys. Maybe because somebody maybe escort him, or like, I'm thinking all types of things. Anyway, we go ahead and we perform. And after the show, he comes up to me and he's like, I really enjoyed how you were scatting along with the bass and the cello and the strings, and I was just like, scatting? I've never scatted in my life, but that's what you saw and you enjoyed it, and that's all that matters. And so we've been in front of a lot of crowds who have been like that. They didn't necessarily recognize what we were doing as hip hop or classical. They saw it through their own lens and they framed it their own way. Some people have literally called us a rock opera. Some people have said we remind them of the Wailers. You know, all of these things that we never identified ourselves with, but individuals in the crowd do. But what at the end of the day, what it comes down to for me is that people enjoyed what they were seeing. And so, essentially perform with them, what I feel like is that we can be in front of anybody now, you know, race, gender, age, it doesn't matter. Because we're not framing anything for one group. It's just like, you know, kind of like, look, here's our heart. You have one too. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you'll receive it. So
yeah. So that's a very, very good observation, because you know, I often don't have that kind of sort of insight in general, because I didn't grow up here. I came here when I was 20 years old. So my idea of strife and American structural problems do not readily, you know, register. Well, you know, and but you did tell me that really stuck with me, was that when we went to Cottage Grove and you kind of figured out they were all like rural, possibly Republican crowd, right? And then you said they really enjoyed us, and then you were very surprised by that. I didn't think much of it, because I'm just oblivious a lot of times about those kind of stuff. But that was very interesting to me. But I have a question for you. So when you say that, you know, you've been saying that you've been firmly rooted in hip hop, you think that you were doing hip hop, but then, you know, I would challenge you by saying that I don't think any hip hoppers would do something like what we've done in Hope Springs Eternal, or even First Song, or even any of these like time changes. If you want to kind of go into just a little bit.
Oh yeah, well, like I said prior, is that, you know, I have a different view of hip hop than a lot of other people who would identify as hip hop purists or observers. So like, you know, I realize that my perspective is very different from others. But what I will say is that, so, you know, for everybody watching, JooWan gave me this piece called Hope Springs Eternal, which is now one of my favorite pieces. I love performing it. But when he first gave it to me, he had a verse in there, which was a verse that I was taking on. And it went from 5/4. We're speaking of time signatures. It went from 5/4 to 4/4 to 3/4 to 2/4, and then it was just like, you know, it just seemed like he was doing all type of gymnastics within, you know, his writing that was unnecessary.
Backflips.
And certainly unfit. In fact, at the time I was, you know, I was still working with another MC, and when he heard that part of the music, he was like, I'm not doing that, you know. And so it was either the choice of us just like skipping doing something over that part of the music, or somebody just taking it on. And so I was like, you know, I'll take on the challenge. I'll do it. I think it's wrong, but I'll do it. And then after doing it, I was kind of amazed to how much I liked it, how musical it was, and how I didn't feel like it disturbed my artist sensibilities. It actually expanded them. So yeah, yeah.
Oh, it's so wrong, but feels so right.
And on that note, I would like to
add one more thing. I just think that, I think it's important to note that, you know, it's actually you, Sandman, that you suggest that we should say, because I said, okay, what we're doing is new concert music. And then you countered me saying that, but no one gives a damn about concert music. I was like, wow, that's a good point. And you suggested that we kind of brand it differently. And when we came up with meta music, and you said that's a better term. And so what we are doing is really not hip hop, really not classical. At this point, it's a fact right now. So we're actually rendering new kind of genre. And I think that, you know, it is paved with many disagreements. We've disagreed so many times in so many heated ways, but the magic is that we kept the conversation going, and we drank a lot. I think that helps too.
Lots and lots of alcohol. Settled many problems.
Yep.
Well,
So
no,
I guess that's it. We should just drink. Everything would be great.
I can also say, and with that is, I think that's also why what we do is actually so great, because we haven't what we didn't say to each other is like, I disagree with you, therefore, go your separate ways. I'm gonna go this way. Never talk to me again. You know, you're that, I'm this, you know, dogs and cats. Like, you know, we didn't do any of that. What we said is like, okay, well, let's keep debating this. You know, let's debate points. You know, and yeah, sometimes it got heated, and maybe that sometimes may have been the alcohol because it was just, but.
Lots of
but
times.
You mean to say this? I mean, that what? I don't take that.
I would usually just get very confused and be like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. I'm leaving.
but I think that's the power of what we're doing, is that it's okay that we disagree.
Yeah.
That's fine. But we're going to keep discussing. We're going to keep rendering a new pathos for how we proceed forward. And it's only gotten better from there. So, yeah.
In fact, I will counter that, and this is going to be my last point on this, that it is crucial that we disagree. Because if we're just all agreeing, there's no change. Because you need thesis and antithesis. Otherwise, there's no synthesis. There has to be tension there. I believe in this.
Definitely going on with that idea. I want to go into our next video. John, if you can play that for us, please.
Yeah.
Cash rules everything around me, cream, get the money. Dollar bill, yo. Cash rules everything around me, cream, get the money. Dollar bills, yo. We can trace back to cash fiduciary conflict, every slug to the bonnet. War and conquest, pillage and populace for the orb and the continent. Bronze, iron, gold, platinum, oil, and diamonds. Wars of violence, the toil of tyrants. Smiling at the scene of the crime with no conscience. Hoping that you're blind to the lies, holding the fine print. Sold for a dime, open line behind them. More grinded, more time and greed. Get rich, exploit everyone and die when cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar bill, yo. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar bill, yo. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar bill, yo. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar bill, yo. On a mission to stack a million up to the ceiling. Sick of this hungry feeling. Economy got me yelling. Gotta be brilliant to maneuver this maneuver. The propo's is the shooter. The schools are in the sewer. We trap like rats, fight over scraps. Lucifer is at work, or are we the producer of pain?